Hello and welcome to What's Literacy by Literacy Quebec. What's Literacy is a community-based podcast for English-speaking lifelong literacy learners. My name is Dan Laxer. I'm a journalist with nearly 30 years experience in broadcast media. I'm a writer with the Suburban newspaper, and I am the host of this podcast where we explore topics around community building, lifelong curiosity, and multiple types of literacy. This episode, we explore Family Literacy Day, which takes place every January 27th. And instead of me telling you what that means, we welcome our guest on this podcast, Honorary Chair of Family Literacy Day, Canadian author and illustrator, Barbara Reid. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, good morning, Dan.
Good to have you on. So you are a multi-award winning author illustrator. I should add Governor General award winning. Some of your works include Watch It Grow, Welcome Baby, I Am Canada, A Celebration, and the new one, I Love You More, which you illustrated with Emile Scher, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But first, tell us, as a writer and visual artist, how did you come to choose children's literature, or how did it come to choose you?
I think I bonded with books from birth. My mom was a big reader and read to me a lot, and I also love drawing. So when I was really little and heard stories before I could read them, I was drawing them. And when I became an avid reader, I loved to draw the characters, my favorite characters in the books. I would copy illustrators that I loved. I just never stopped. And
Mhm.
when I went to OCAD, the Ontario College of Art and Design, anytime we had freedom within a project,
Yeah.
I somehow worked it into being a children's theme. So I just never left that my childhood reading.
And from what I understand, your illustrations are based on you work with clay.
Yes.
How does that work?
Uh, well, I have a green piece here because our theme is green this year.
Hmm.
It's modeling clay, so it stays squishy forever. It's not like Play-Doh that goes crunchy. So I take
More like
illustration board.
plasticine?
Hmm?
Plasticine?
Yeah, the original name was plasticine. It comes in different brand names now,
Okay.
but plasticine is like the generic word, and it just means it's not drying, it doesn't harden. You can work it and rework it. And for my art, I use a heavy cardboard illustration board, and I just spread the clay on it. I make shapes, add textures. So it's dimensional, but not fully 3D.
Hmm.
And then we photograph it.
Okay, from above, I suppose. That's absolutely fascinating. Who are some of the authors that you feel made an impact, not just on children's lit, but on yourself as well, perhaps?
Uh, Well, I come from long ago, so I was very into the Narnia books when I was growing up. I loved Beatrix Potter. Um, in my childhood, most of the books that we could find in our libraries were British or American, so those were my first teachers.
Hmm.
But now there's such an incredible Canadian publishing group. There's so many Canadian materials available for kids, but just all of them. And I like fine artists too. I love Toulouse-Lautrec. I love the illustrator Arthur Rackham,
Hmm.
uh, very old timey, just for their drawing and their storytelling. I think a big influence was the illustrator Pauline Baynes, who was British, and she illustrated the Narnia books with line drawings. And her characters just moved, and her composition, even with simple black and white, I copied them so often that I learned a lot from her.
And some of your work, aside from some of the newer books, you have illustrated newer versions of older stories. So you
Yeah,
brought those back.
it's fun. I've done some nursery rhymes, and yeah, it's kind of nice to do something classic too and change it up.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about the new book, I Love You More.
Oh, I should grab it. I wasn't thinking.
No, it's quite all right. I love your workspace.
This one.
Yeah, that's the one.
This was super exciting. It was just such a amazing way it came together. The author Emile Scher uh, as authors do, he submitted the manuscript
Mm.
to the publisher I work with, Scholastic. Um, and then they submitted to me. Emil didn't know, but they didn't realize that Emil and I know each other. Our kids grew up at the same school. We used to hang out waiting for kids to come out of school together. And there were a few weeks where I couldn't say like that I was doing his book. And then finally we had this explosion in the bulk store on the Danforth in Toronto. It's like, we're doing a book together.
Nice.
And I love the concept because it's a word game
Hmm.
and it becomes a visual game in the book. So one person says, "I love you more than um, pencils love paper," and the other person has to come back with a rejoinder, and it's really the one thing needs to need the other thing to become itself. So there were all these ideas in the book, and then I put them together, but we decided early not to match them to the words, which is challenging for some people,
Hmm.
not so much for kids who just they read pictures.
Yes.
So as they're flipping through the book, they'll go, "Oh, that was back there," and it's kind of an I Spy book
Yeah,
about all these
absolutely.
different "I love yous."
I'm so glad that you mentioned Scholastic because when I was growing up, when I was in elementary school, that was my first experience buying books for myself. Was I don't know if they still do it the same way, but we get these forms to fill out, and you have to bring the money into school, and then the box of books shows up in your classroom, and it's such an exciting day. And so yeah, I remember that's where I got some of my earliest, let's say, not my earliest books, but the ones that I chose and read on my own.
That's something that's really important. Is those books? It's been a tradition for years and years, and I've traveled a lot. I've been in taxi drivers where they said, Scholastic, that's how I got my books,
Yeah.
in like northern Manitoba. It made books available, but also, and I think one of the foundations that Scholastic is known for is they're books that children choose.
Hmm.
And that's huge. If you want kids to become literate, enjoy reading, learn to read, improve their reading, they have to like it. It has to be fun. So when they get to make a choice like that, whether it's Captain Underpants or a nonfiction book, that's where their interest is. So they're going to enjoy it. And that's huge.
When my kids were smaller, they're older now. When they were in like, yeah, I remember their grade two teacher, they had a reading corner, and the bookshelf had comic books on it. And I raised an eyebrow and I said, "You allow them to read comic books?" And she said, "As long as they're reading, it doesn't matter."
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that graphic novels, picture books, comic books can be a gateway to young readers that maybe have a language barrier
Hmm.
or learn differently. It's any way you can open a little pathway towards finding the meaning in something is important, whether it's music or images. Also, our world is so visual now. If kids play video games, they're picking up cues from the characters by their costumes, by
Yes.
all kinds of things. So they're reading meaning into art all the time. So I think if they enjoy graphic novels, comic books, go for it because they're getting meaning. And it might become a way that they learn to express themselves also.
We're kind of sliding in now to a couple of the topics I wanted to get to. Family Literacy Day, and I know the theme this year is "Let's Be Green Together," and we'll talk about that in a moment. But let's talk about it in general. As I mentioned, my kids are older now, but I used to read to them constantly, to the point where I used to be able to recite "Goodnight Moon" by heart, parts of "Green Eggs and Ham" and "Fox and Socks." I could probably still do it, but I'll have to look into that later. And reading time was fun time, at least it was for me. But like I said, they're older and they're not readers anymore. Somewhere along the way, that love of reading that we tried to foster in them kind of got lost. And now parents have a set of distractions to deal with, social media. You mentioned video games and, of course, TikTok. And these are distractions that even young parents have to contend with, that they're falling prey to as well. How can we foster not just a love of reading in kids, but a lifelong love of reading?
I think the key is as much as we're bombarded with social media and the internet, we're also bombarded with the messages like turn off the screen. It's particularly um, unhealthy for very young children to spend a lot of time on the screen before they establish how to relate to humans.
Hmm.
And so reading together, it's more than just the literacy. It's building a relationship, and more than anything, kids want a relationship with their parent or caregiver. That they want you. So if the parent is on a screen and the kid is on a screen, it's not happening. It's really low tech and easy to read a book together. It's hard to strike up a meaningful conversation with a 3-year-old,
Hmm.
but you can have time together by reading a book, and it's a calm time, it's a together time, and when you start to build that bond, then literacy and reading also becomes pleasurable. And as kids grow, the other thing it does is improve vocabulary, all kinds of things they're picking up. As they grow, I mean, you wander in and out of times in your life when you're reading avidly, but if you have that foundation, you have the choice,
Hmm.
and you can enjoy books.
I
So
think it
I,
was,
I love. There's a poster in it's around in libraries like there's no better app than your lap, and I think that's very true.
it's fantastic. Well, I think it was the documentary filmmaker Ken Burns. He did a commencement address some years ago, and he said the book is still the greatest form of technology ever invented.
Yes,
Yeah, for all those reasons, for all the things that, for all the synapses it could fire in your brain, and the things you
yeah,
take in while reading. But yeah, I think it is. I don't want to be one of those people who, pulls my pants up to my chest and says, kids today. But I think you're right when you talk about the phones and the apps. Part of the problem is young parents today grew up with smartphones, so it's almost an extension of themselves. And we need, not just to get kids back into books, but we need to get young parents back into books, back into readings. And if you consider that, I mean, it's still such a huge business, big box bookstores, used bookstores, online bookstores. It shouldn't be that big a chore.
yeah. I'm approaching grandparent age,
Hmm.
um, and what I see with young parents today, there's a large group that is very conscious of the interference of tech. Books are like retro and groovy, and there's a
Yeah.
boom amongst those parents, but also for people coming from newcomers to Canada, disadvantaged areas, libraries, you can have any book you want for free. Um, and that's fantastic. And libraries are booming with families, and they run programs. It's just this dream. You can walk in and take out a book. I know there was a new library a few years back that opened in Toronto in the St. Jamestown area, and in the first 3 days that every when the library opened, all the books were gone. They had to close the library. It was so popular. So books are still a great option and easy to get.
Yeah, well said. So we mentioned that this year's theme for Family Literacy Day is "Let's Be Green Together." Let's talk about the partnering of literacy and being green, which Kermit the Frog used to say is not all that easy.
I think it's a fantastic connection because I think everyone on the planet has to start understanding what's happening to our world. And a first step with children, just as we want to engage them with reading and literacy, I think we want to engage them with environmental awareness and literacy. Children love being outside. They love nature. They just take to it. You really don't have to struggle to get them to enjoy being outdoors and looking at worms and things. And you have to start it young. If they establish a love and appreciation of nature and the earth and a sense of wonder, that will progress hopefully. And because the kids now are our problem solvers of tomorrow. So if they have the tools to take that knowledge and that passion, either through reading, through research, for being aware of how to interpret news, how to find the true from the false, all of those skills are needed for the future. And for me, the environment is the biggest thing we have to be concerned about.
We argue all the time, especially here in Montreal. Our mayor is an environmental mayor. People can't stand that there's bicycle paths all over the place, and she wants to work on greening the environment a little bit more. And I thought about it a lot, and I started to get on board. And I thought about that old saying, a society grows great when old men plant trees, the shade of which they know they'll never sit under.
Yes.
And so the way I see it, it's important to think about climate and to think about the environment, not for me anymore, but for my kids and their kids and my great grandchildren one day. I'm going to want to know wherever I'll be that they'll still be enjoying the planet.
Hmm. Yes. Learning about trees, the ocean, the science, it's really critical. And I think just being aware of that without the message can be hard to take for very young children. It's a bit dire, but by appreciating things and small steps, because I just read something about, it's worse to not take any step than to just take a small one. Like,
Yes.
we can't solve it, but everybody can do something. So by showing kids recycling, they can help flatten boxes with you,
Mhm.
using things like little free libraries, recycling. You have books that you're tired of, exchange them with someone. Just small things create awareness.
So let's talk a little bit more about that because I know that on the ABC Life Literacy website, there's great stuff for the Greening of Family Literacy Day. There's activity sheets, an activity book, and Barbara Reid's tip sheet. Tell me about some of those tips.
I have
There we go.
it. Well, I mentioned a little free library, but any kind of recycling, garage sales, things like that. Like, stop making garbage. If you need something, exchange it. Libraries, I've talked about trying to go screen free for a day. Just see what happens. It's not too scary. And recycling. I'm going to be doing a workshop as a live event for the day, and I realize, like, I recycle like crazy because modeling clay is quite reusable, and more for kids doing art and crafts, they can use recycled materials.
Mhm.
Save cardboard, yogurt lids, all kinds of stuff like that is great art material.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
things
That's
like
what we
that,
used to do
and
as
go
kids, in
outside.
kindergarten, right? Everything we used was a recycled something.
Absolutely. Teachers are incredible recyclers, like they've
Yeah.
been at it forever.
And we covered it all in macaroni and spray painted it gold.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and now probably there's an aerosol-free spray paint.
Yeah. Yeah. Good
So
point.
it gets better.
So let's bring it back around full circle. We're talking about greening specifically of Family Literacy Day. So let's talk briefly about the connection and how literacy comes into play.
Well, I guess just by being aware of environmental things and celebrating literacy can just be a topic. I know there are events all across Canada. Um, there are author readings, there are pajama sleepovers, there's things like that. And the resources in terms of environmental reading or nature books or things like that are vast. So maybe pay attention to that. One area that sometimes gets missed when we talk about reading with kids, there's the image of the storybook, but there's so much nonfiction.
Mhm.
And a lot of kids really dig facts, and they get into something like dinosaurs or squirrels. I don't know. Kids find bugs. There are incredibly funny and informative books about, like, the bacteria that's in your nose, like gross stuff that kids love. So look into nonfiction, and because if a kid finds something that they find hilarious or fascinating, they're going to take off. And we can definitely use more inquirers and scientists for the
Yeah,
future.
absolutely. Well said. You know what? I think that's about all the time we have. We got to wrap it up there. But I want to thank you so much, Barbara Reid, author, illustrator, and honorary chair of Family Literacy Day. It's been great to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much, and happy reading.
Happy reading to you. And thank you all for tuning in today. Make sure to download, listen, and share. You can find us on Spotify and at literacyquebec.org. And if you need assistance or support with tasks that require reading, writing, or digital literacy skills, call the free literacy helpline at 1-888-521-8181. That's 1-888-521-81. I'm Dan Laxer. See you next time on What's Literacy? That was great. Thank you so much.